Hey everybody, welcome to NFL Fantasy Live. I'm Patrick Claybon here with Marcus Grant, Adam Rankin, Maurice Jones-Drew. Happy almost Halloween. As you can see, we are dressed for the occasion to celebrate. I am hovering high above the Earth's atmosphere. Marcus is rocking the Cam Newton. Rank is ready to put out some fires. And MJD, are you hunting for vengeance?
Mike was off, but it happened.
I felt it.
I'm so excited.
Oh, there we go.
I'm so excited. But are you not entertained?
We're all excited. Well, the thing is, if you want entertainment, we were going to wait to show everybody Michael F. Florio. But in fact, let's get Florio in here because his costume is spectacular. Are you a bear?
What's that bear doing?
What's that bear do? You can call me Sir Purr.
Sir Purr, shout out to Robbie Anderson and Sir Purr. We will see Michael Florio coming up here in just a bit because we have a lot of serious fantasy analysis ahead here, starting with our Sunday Showdowns. We're going to spend some time on every matchup on the docket to help you decide who to start and who to sit. We start with the game of the week in the AFC, Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Marcus, you got to start Halloween off with a beware.
Absolutely. You got to beware of James Conner this week. It's a scary matchup, definitely against the Baltimore Ravens. They've given up the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. And in his career against the Ravens, he has just one game with more than 55 scrimmage yards, one total touchdown across all of those games. And lately, he's been losing touches near the goal line to Benny Snell and Chase Claypool. I get if you have to start him, but this is not particularly an exciting matchup for him.
I'm going to be looking at a sleeper in this game, and it's going to be Marquise Hollywood Brown. He's had at least 12 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games. He had close to 20 fantasy points in week 5 against the Bengals. But one of the things that stands out to me that, yes, this Steelers defense is excellent, but they do allow a lot of air yards, and they've allowed the 7th most yards per game to wide receivers this season. So that's why I'm kind of liking Hollywood Brown this week.
All right, let's look over to Vikings and the Packers. A lot of fantasy options on the field here. MJD, who are we going to start?
I'm starting all the Packers offense. I think right now Minnesota's defense is down. You trade away Yannick Ngakoue, Danielle Hunter goes on IR with surgery. And then your corner, one of your better young corners, Danzier, is on the COVID list. So play as many Packers as you can in this matchup.
I know, folks, Justin Jefferson has put your fantasy team on his back in these last few weeks. And I'm not going to tell you to disregard that, but just watch out because this Packers defense was putting all kinds of pressure on Cousins in week 1. Only 3 targets for Jefferson then, and of course, he's gotten better in this offense. But how much better is Minnesota in pass protection? I say beware the star rookie receiver. Let's go over to the Titans and the Bengals rank. You're starting a receiver that maybe doesn't get enough love.
Oh, yeah. I think people overlook Tyler Boyd this year. He's averaging close to 17 fantasy points per game. That would make him the wide receiver 17 on the season. He scored 16 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 games. And this Titans defense has allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. And as a matter of fact, over the last couple of weeks, there's nobody that has allowed more production to the wide receiver position. So I feel very comfortable starting Tyler Boyd this week.
And for me, anytime you go to sleep, sometimes you have nightmares, but this may be a beautiful dream. My sleeper is going to be Corey Davis. I just believe the Bengals defense has been giving up. You give up 5 touchdown passes to Baker Mayfield. Corey Davis and his Tennessee Titans offense. I just want some of this Cincinnati defense. And if you have him, I put him in the flex. He has the potential to have a huge game this week.
Yeah, he's been flexible in his past few games. Glad to have him back off of the COVID list. He scored a touchdown first game back. Cowboys, Eagles now. Ben DiNucci expected to start for Dallas. Marcus?
Yeah, so that's the reason you want to start the Eagles defense. They are still available in about 40% of NFL.com leagues. They should be a great streaming option for a lot of folks. As you mentioned, the rookie is expected to make his first ever NFL start, and he's doing it behind an offensive line that has just been wrecked between retirements, between injuries. This offensive line is not the strength of the offense like it once was, so I expect that the Eagles can pin their ears back, really come after DiNucci, and make some plays this week.
And let's go all over the Dallas Cowboys and go to the other side. I'm starting Boston Scott. because I'm chasing the Dallas defense around with backs in the passing game. Coming off of the game winner on Thursday Night Football, the Eagles team potentially rounds into form. Scott scores one that he should and maybe one that he shouldn't in what could be a laugher in Philadelphia. Speaking of the Cowboys, as we have bagged on the offense and defense, real quick, guys, is anybody starting any of the Cowboys receivers this week?
No.
I'm starting Amari Cooper because I have to. But I think if they're down, you're going to get a ton of pass yards on the back end of the game. May work out.
All right, we got a lot of other games to get into here on this hour on NFL Fantasy Live. But we're going to keep things going here and get into, in case you missed it, some news and notes for everybody to catch up on. We start with the Packers and their running back Aaron Jones. He has been ruled out for Week 8. Matt LaFleur saying Jones' calf injury just didn't heal enough to play against the Vikings. Marcus, would you start Jamal Williams in his stead this week?
Absolutely. I expect him to get another full workload like we saw last week, and he had a really good game against the Texans, 114 scrimmage yards, found the end zone, and you heard MJD talk about Yannick Ngakoue not being there, Danielle Hunter not being healthy, so that's a couple of really important pieces up front that are not going to be there, so I think it could be another good game for Jamal Williams.
And it's another week of waiting for Michael Thomas. He got a limited run in practice yesterday. Today, he's been ruled out with a high ankle sprain that he's had for some time now. Adam Rank, is Tre'Quan Smith worth the roll of the dice in fantasy this week against the Bears?
I would avoid that matchup this week because the Bears' defense has been very good at shutting down the pass. They've got an elite corner in Kyle Fuller. Jalen Johnson is on his way to being a really good NFL cornerback during his rookie season. So I would look through the waiver wire, look for guys like Nelson Aguilar, Scotty Miller, and players like that. I would try to avoid this matchup if you could.
And Dalvin Cook officially questionable for Sunday's game against the Packers. He's working his way back from a groin injury. Our Tom Pelissero tells us that Cook is expected to play this week after missing one game. MJD, your expectations for Dalvin this week?
I know Dalvin's going to get the workload. Minnesota is just not the same without him. For me, I'm going to play him. I expect him to have a big game. They're going to need him to have a big game if they're going to be able to contend in this one. So expect Dalvin Cook to get a bunch of work this week.
And if you're looking for work for some more running backs, let's go through some other notable injuries. Chris Carson is questionable right now. Miles Sanders out, as is Jamison Crowder. That limits some opportunity for the Jets offense. Again, doubtful for Allen Robinson. Julian Edelman is out. Not a lot of guys on the outside for Cam and company in New England. From there, let's get to last night's action. Falcons and Panthers on Thursday Night Football. Did anyone predict Curtis Samuel would be the top scorer in this one, Marcus?
I don't think so, although shout out to Cynthia Freeland because she did have him in her daily fantasy lineup, so props to her on that one. It was a great first half, mostly for Samuel. Didn't do much in the second half, and I think if you got him, congratulations, but he's just so unpredictable. His value as a rusher is going to vanish once Christian McCaffrey is back, which could likely be next week, and he's not seeing enough targets to be a reliable fantasy receiver, so while he's a nice, useful piece for the Panthers offense, he's not so much for your fantasy offense.
And I'm really wondering, Marcus, if this is going to spell doom for Mike Davis's production once Christian McCaffrey returns, because if they need a change of pace option, it seems like Curtis Samuel could be the guy who gets the call there. That'll be something to monitor. And something else I want to monitor with DJ Moore is that I really liked last night that he was running more underneath routes. He was running slants 66 or just over 66% of the time. Obviously, his big reception came down the field. There were some opportunities to get him the ball. He was getting open. I think a lot of it had to do with the front seven of the Falcons playing exceptional last night, and that kind of took away. It didn't allow Teddy Bridgewater to make a lot of reads, but there were opportunities where DJ Moore was open. So I think moving forward, if this becomes a focal point of their offense, where they're throwing more slants to DJ Moore, that I could really help him. I think that's where he's his most effective, and that's what they should do, and I'm going to look forward to them using that more in the coming weeks.
On the other side of the football, one of the top wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, has been playing out of this world this season. He went down with a foot injury last night. Ian Rappaport says x-rays were negative. We are awaiting results of an MRI to see the full extent of that injury. It was a tough spot for Atlanta, but at least strength, they've got Quintorius Lopez-Jones.
Absolutely. And you know what? This is a classic Julio Jones game where he has 7 receptions, 137 yards, and still people will complain he doesn't get into the end zone or this or that or whatever. It's like, this guy is giving you 20 points every time he steps onto the field. His season average is just a hair over 18 fantasy points. That's good for the wide receiver 9. So I don't know why everybody always has to complain, why he's always picked on for this. But he is one of the most reliable options in fantasy, and he needs our deference and our respect.
Yes, we love you, Julio. And also got an update on that MRI for Calvin Ridley. He is listed as day-to-day, could possibly play in Week 9. Let's look over elsewhere on the offense. MJD, you've watched a lot of Todd Gurley in your days. He did score a touchdown last night, his 8th of the season. But do you have any concerns about maintaining that value that he's had down the stretch?
No, not at all. They try to run the ball with him in the red zone, and that's what you want your running backs to get. They don't throw the ball as much down there as you would think, and that's why Julio Jones has all those yards and not a lot of touchdowns. Todd Gurley is the focal point once they get inside the 15 or inside the 20, and that's where they want to utilize him. They want to be smash mouth. So, yes, he's touchdown dependent, but guess what? He's going to get you a touchdown a week.
It's time for us to break the ranks with Adam Rank. He is the author of NFL.com's Fantasy Player Rankings. It is our very own Sir Purr, or Michael F. Florio, who is dressed as Sir Purr for Halloween. Every week, Sir Purr, or Michael, carefully arranges all the top fantasy stars with his delicate paws. And then Adam Rank just takes out the big firefighter axe and chops them all down on live TV while everybody watches. So let's get into it, Rank. Which of Florio's quarterback rankings did you really disagree with this week?
Well, the one that stands out to me is Lamar Jackson going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have a small sample size of him going up against the Steelers. Last year, he finished with just over 11 fantasy points. He was sacked a bunch. Most of his production came because he ran for 70 yards. And then this year, you look at everything that's going on. The Steelers have not allowed a top 12 fantasy quarterback this season. Lamar himself has finished outside of the top 15 in 3 of 5 weeks. How is he going to be QB5 ahead of guys like Josh Allen, ahead of guys like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert? What's happening?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot in the numbers that I could disagree with. Like, Lamar's worst start of his career fantasy-wise was against the Steelers last year. The one thing you can hang your hat on here is that the Steelers do give up a lot of deep passes, so hopefully that he could connect with Marquise Brown. But Rank, I just have a feeling, right? Like, we've been waiting all year for that signature Lamar game, and right now this week no one expects it. I think that's when Lamar breaks out.
Yeah, you can't argue with the feeling. He's feeling it. He's Sir Purr. I'm on board about it. Let's go. Where else? Where else did our cat friend Rank go astray this week?
Well, if we're doing feeling rankings, then how do we have Le'Veon Bell at 33 in the revenge game? I understand. Don't do anything ridiculous. Don't start him over Alvin Kamara, because I made a rant about this. And people are like, oh, so I'm gonna sit Dalvin Cook. No. But 33, Mike, he's gonna be an RB2 this week. Come on, you've got to have a feeling. Trust your feelings. You know it's true.
I like it more as a flex option, Rank. Everyone is expecting this to be the ultimate revenge game, but I will say Lev Bell last week in his first game only played a third of the snaps, did not run a single route. I think if you start him, you're hoping that Andy Reid and the Chiefs are nice enough to give him a goal line touch so he could score a touchdown. I want him to have a big game this week, but CEH is still there and he's not going away.
I think
That's
Andy
exactly
Reid's
what
more vindictive
we're hoping
than you.
for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, revenge. It's powerful. So is criticism. Where else did Sir Purr whiff, right?
Well, I want to give a little bit of a shout out to Cole Beasley. To me, he has been one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football, and I see him coming in at number 33, and it just feels a little too low for me. I know that he's the wide receiver 28 on the season, so it's really not that big of a deal. But I think this is such a huge game for Buffalo. One where they can really cement themselves. And I guess I'm going back to the feeling game as well. This just seems like a moment for the Bills to break out. That Patriots team, Their depth has been decimated. I think this is going to be a monster game. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Cole Beasley.
I hope, as a Bills fan, Rank, I hope so. Cole Beasley, I think, has kind of flown under the radar this year. He's on pace to go for over 1,000 yards, but John Brown is looking like he is going to return this week, so I think that is another mouth to feed. There's bad weather on the forecast in Buffalo, and I don't really fear the Patriots offense at all, so I'm not sure if this is going to be a very high-scoring game.
I tried to appeal to him as a Bills
Michael
fan.
F. Florio.
Well,
If you want to see all
today.
of Florio's fantasy rankings, yes, he's both. He can be both. He contains multitudes. He's got 9 lives. Why wouldn't he? Go over NFL.com as you weigh those tough decisions. NFL.com/fantasy. See all of Michael's work. Okay, let's keep going. Let's get back into the Halloween spirit now. Try to figure out who is haunting your roster as we welcome back Marcus, Rank, MJD. Marcus, which player have you not been able to exercise from your fantasy football team?
It's been Joshua Kelly, just, that guy from UCLA who he had a good start to his season, had 25.3 fantasy points in his first 2 games, but in the 4 games since, just 24.6. But here's the thing. He's still playing a good number of snaps. He's still seeing about 15 touches per game. So that's why I just haven't been able to completely get rid of him, right? I think he's gone, and then all of a sudden he shows back up again. But it's mostly Justin Jackson who's taking over. I hang on to him, though, because my running back struggles are real.
No, I feel that with Joshua Kelly and with Justin Jackson. But DJ Chark is a guy, I drafted him in the 7th round and thought I was getting a good wide receiver. Oh, he's a good wide receiver. I thought I was going to get a lot of production from him. But this dude has ghosted my lineup. He's had fewer than 13 fantasy points in 5 of his 6 games this season. And thankfully, he's on a bye. Because I would have just started him. Because I can't help but start him. Because every time I think, this is it. You're going to come through for me. I love him. I love Gardner. But it just hasn't been there. Thankfully, they're on a bye. And you know what? I might not be picking up the phone next week when you say, hey, let's go hang out. I'm like, no, might have to leave you on my bench.
Yeah, for me, guys, it's going to be Leonard Fournette. And it's less about him and more about the team around him. I think Leonard Fournette hasn't had the rare opportunity since the Carolina Panthers game early in the season. And yes, he's haunted my roster, and I'm a little upset about it. But you know what? He's a cold weather back. And so I'm going to keep him because I know once they start playing later in the season, as soon as I cut him or waive him or whatever it may be, he's going to have a huge game. I refuse to do it. I'll keep him on my bench until he has a great matchup.
Well, let me tell you, MJD, I am not doing that because we got to get some kicker talk. Greg the Leg, or in spooky Halloween fashion, like Greg the Severed Leg. It was because of concerns about waiver priority. I just kind of sat on having this dude. I thought the offense was going to score a lot of points at the start of the season. Then I thought they were going to need to kick a lot of field goals. Then they're just bad. Finally, able to get rid of him in a few leagues, just as a reminder of all the horrible things I believed at the start of the season and just how wrong they were. Greg Zuerlein is haunting my roster. We're not the only ones dealing with the ghost of fantasy points past. We opened it up to you on Twitter for you to tell us who's haunting your fantasy rosters. Here's what you told us. Joshua is haunted by Mark Ingram. Says he's an awesome dude, always a hoot-at in my eyes, but he was killing me this year. He's currently residing on his bench. MJD, should he cut him?
Well, first of all, you tagged him in the tweet. That's disrespectful.
Not cool.
Okay? You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to just write his name in. But I'll tell you this much. Similar to Leonard Fournette, I believe Mark Ingram's going to have a big late season run. The Ravens want to run the ball. They've kind of had an identity crisis, and I know they've added a bunch of backs, but they're going to always rely on the guy that's been to the playoffs late in the year, and I think Mark Ingram's going to get some carries. So I would keep him on my bench until you start seeing some favorable matchups.
Yeah, don't at the players. We'll go over to Mike, who says David Montgomery gets too much work to cut, but he's not good enough to ever start on his team. As a Bears fan, Adam Rank, is Montgomery worth keeping for Mike?
Mike, didn't you watch the show the other day? Or no, it was on Fantasy Bites, where Michael F. Florio, Sir Purr himself, said this is a guy you should be trading for because you want him on your roster. Now, obviously, the Bears, did not play well on Monday night. And ever since Daniels went down, that offensive line has not looked as good as it did earlier in the season. But I do believe there are better matchups looming, and they do want to run the football. Contrary to what everybody says, Matt Nagy would love to run the football. So if you have David Montgomery, hang on to him.
And last but not least, this one coming from Alex. Julian Edelman has had weeks of no production, now a knee injury. I'd say it's insult to injury, but I think in his case it's the other way around. Wow, Alex is really getting after Julian Edelman, Marcus. Are we going to keep Edelman on the roster?
I don't think so. Well, first off, if Julian Edelman had a scary Twitter name, he'd probably be like Boolean Headlessman or something like that. But at this point, I think you can probably put him back on the waiver wire. Unlike running back, wide receiver is a lot deeper, so you can make a lot more moves and not really be so stressed about it. But the offense is struggling. As you mentioned, we don't know how long he's going to be out with the injury. So I think it's safe at this point to move on.
On Fantasy Live, getting back into the Sunday showdowns, Russell Wilson trailing only Kyler Murray in total fantasy points this season. But this week, his Seahawks face that tough matchup for quarterbacks, the 49ers. As we keep it going here with Marcus Grant and Michael F. Florio, how do you see this matchup shaking out, Marcus?
Well, I would say one thing, just to beware of Tyler Lockett. Part of it is that the matchup on paper is not a good one. The Niners are giving up the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. But just a little quirk, and it's not necessarily predictive, but just certainly interesting. Yeah, last week was the 10th game that Lockett's had with 100 or more receiving yards. In the previous 9, he's followed up 7 times with 55 or fewer yards. 5 times he's gone with less than 40 yards. So he just has struggled to really back up his big games there. And that's just something I would keep in mind if you're putting him in your lineup.
Yeah, Marcus, that would come 1 week too late for those who played Lockett like myself, but I think you should start Brandon Ayuk against the Seahawks. He's coming off a big game where he went for over 100 yards last week. I think they'll have to throw more to keep up with Seattle, and no Debo equals more opportunity, and more opportunity should equal more fantasy points as Seattle allows the most yards and fantasy points to wide receivers this year.
Have more opportunity in the run game as well. Let's go over to the Bears and the Saints. Florio, what are we going to do with Drew Brees this week?
I'm saying sit him. I'm not a huge home road splits guy, but Brees on the road this year is averaging just 15 fantasy points compared to 21 at home. And this is his first outdoor game of the year. And it's a tough matchup. The Bears have allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, and they haven't allowed 20 to a quarterback in a single game.
On the other side, Florio, I'm going to go with starting Jimmy Graham, and you probably have been for the past few weeks. If he's available in your league, go stream him. The Nick Foles Jimmy Graham has been able to get in the end zone more. And again, as we told you at the top of the show, Allen Robinson, doubtful, still in that concussion protocol. Maybe more opportunity for the big tight end who, I don't know if folks know this, he used to play basketball. Let's go over to the Jets and the Chiefs. The Jets, yikes. Florio, are you worried about what Le'Veon Bell is going to do to CEH?
I'm not. I said earlier I like Bell as a flex option, but I still think you should start CEH. He is the only running back to score 11 or more fantasy points in all 7 games this season, and it's a good matchup. The Jets have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to running backs, and this could be a game where the Chiefs are just playing with a multiple score lead, so there could be enough for both backs this week.
I'll stay in this one and stay on the same offense. I am smashing the start for Tyreek Hill. The Jets defense is in the bottom 10 in terms of net yards per attempt. Tyreek Hill hasn't had that typical 20 plus yards per catch game in some weeks. Well, here's the thing. He's played the Jets twice in his young career. He averages 23 yards per catch against the Jets. I say start Tyreek Hill. His quarterback, of course, is a must start every single week, but through 7 games, he has just 1 game with 250 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 4 of those type of games through week 7 last year and 5 in 2018. He's coming off a 12-point game against the Broncos. He was able to chill out because they were mauling them. It's time to feel a little bit better. It's time for Feel Good Friday. Maurice Jones-Drew, help all the Mahomes managers out there feel better with this game going up against the Jets.
You know, similar like Marcus Decimus Aurelius when he was fighting in the Colosseum in Rome against all those guys, you have to have a plan. And the plan has been kind of thrown out the window because the defense has been scoring. They've been scoring on special teams, and they've been running the ball really well. But I'm here to tell you guys not to panic. It's Friday. Cue the music and roll the tape. There we go. Here we go. Patrick Mahomes here. We're looking at Marlon Humphrey. right? And we know that Marlon Humphrey wants to take Tyreek Hill out here in the flat. But we have an opportunity, and we like to call this a money ball right here to Travis Kelce over the middle. Great job reading. Let's remember the Baltimore Ravens, they were the number one defense at this time. Now here, this is a play I love. Marlon Humphrey's coming on a blitz. Patrick Mahomes see it. He's sliding to his left. And watch him plant that foot and let it rip as Marcus Peters jumps on the over that we just saw from Travis Kelce. He takes the corner. We hit Mecole Hardman with a rocket ball. Now, I'm not saying he's going to do this all the time. I'm not saying that. You know what? I am saying he's going to do this all the time because I need him to. And it's going to start this week. And I think the Chiefs are going to roll from here on out. Patrick Mahomes, be prepared for 3 touchdown games.
We got more Sunday showdowns as we preview the Pats and the Bills. We'll start with you, Adam Rank. Are you concerned about Josh Allen facing the defense that's allowed the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks?
I'm not concerned about this at all. And I know that Josh Allen hasn't been as prolific over the last couple of games as he was when he first started the season. He's still had 280 passing yards in 5 of 7 games, 25 fantasy points in 4 games this season. And really, when I look at this Patriots roster, they had the most opt-outs coming into the year. And I think that lack of depth is starting to really show itself. I expect a huge game from the Buffalo Bills.
All right, let's look over to Vegas and Cleveland. Florio, do you have a sleeper for us?
I think Baker Mayfield is a sleeper quarterback for anyone in need of grabbing someone off the waiver wire this week. He's coming off of a career game with 5 touchdowns and nearly 30 fantasy points, and it couldn't have come at a better time as he gets the Raiders this week, who have given up 25 or more fantasy points to quarterbacks in 3 straight games.
Yeah, I take some credit for Baker's big game after I disparaged him in a private Slack chat last week. But anyway, I'm going to say Darren Waller is a must-start this week. He's getting 27% of the Raiders' targets. He is by far the number 1 option in this passing game. He's had 15 or more fantasy points in 4 of 6 games this season, and he's facing a Browns defense that's given up the 6th most receptions to tight ends. I look for Derek Carr to hit him early and often in this one.
We will move over to the Rams at the Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa gets the start for Miami. Who starts for you, Marcus?
Darrell Henderson gets the start for me. And I know that the Rams running back situation has been confusing and frustrating, but Henderson has been the most effective back on this team, really by any measure. He's led the running backs in snaps for the past 3 weeks, and he's going against the Dolphins defense that's given up the 8th most fantasy points per game to running backs. So I've said all that, which certainly means that this is going to be the Cam Akers game, but I still say you start Darrell Henderson anyway.
I think you could start the running back on the other side of the ball here as well. Myles Gaskins has scored 14 or more in 4 of the last 5, as you see there. He's also good for about 4 or 5 targets per game, and that's big because the Rams allow the 9th most catches to running backs. And I think with this being Tua's start against a tough first start against a tough Rams defense, I think they're going to try to rely on the run a little bit more.
And we will see how they rely, as this Dolphins offense has been one of the pleasant surprises of fantasy football this season. But in honor of Halloween, our fantasy filmmaker, Adam Rank, has a terrifying tale that is sure to give some managers chills. Enjoy this trailer for the scariest story of the week, now streaming.
For the last week, thousands of fantasy managers have kept a secret.
It's Tua time in Miami.
And I'm going to try to pick him up in spots.
Tua Tagovailoa is now the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. They're off this week. You're not going to see him.
But not all secrets stay buried.
Someone sent this to me. I know who you picked up last week. How do they know?
You thought you were being sneaky. But as you run out of options this bye week, there's nowhere left to turn. And the matchup this week is terrifying. I know who you picked up last week. Now streaming, if you dare.
Aaron Donald is scary, legitimately fearful for Tua there. Hopefully he has a nice start. It's time for Surprising Sleepers, presented by Geico. Let's find some players that we can stream without causing any nightmares. Michael F. Florio, since you write our streamers column on NFL.com, why don't you start us off?
I think if you need a sleeper tight end, and who doesn't need a tight end at this point of the season, I think you go with Richard Rodgers going up against the Cowboys this week. Carson Wentz is throwing nearly 12 passes per game to tight ends. That is the most in the NFL. We saw it last week when Richard Rodgers had 8 targets and led this team in receiving yards, and it doesn't hurt that since week 2, the Cowboys have allowed the 8th most points to tight ends. I think you could start Richard Rodgers this week.
Richard Rodgers really was a nice play last week for anybody who dared. Henry Ruggs, though, could be a really nice play this week for anyone who dares. He is the designated deep threat in this offense. 19.3 air yards per target, and that is really where the Browns secondary is struggling the most. They are allowed 49 receptions on throws of 10 or more air yards. That's 3rd most in the league. 13 touchdowns on those long throws. That's the most in the league. So it might not be a lot of targets for Henry Ruggs, but he may not need a whole lot in order to have some big plays and some big fantasy numbers.
Yeah, I like both of those.
Got a lot of injuries at receiver. Oh, sorry, Rick. I'll jump in because it's a surprise to everybody. Denzel Mims is a surprise. I'm going with the Jet. I swore off Jets, but I like the debut from Denzel. A little liftoff for the band there on Jets. Darnold targeted him 7 times against the Bills. That's the kind of action I want. I imagine garbage time will be stinky and plentiful. I'm going to take a shot on Denzel Mims this week, right?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Patrick. I was so excited to talk about my guy because you know what time it is? Miller time. You know what? I love this pickup this week going up against the New York Giants on Monday night. As you see right there, every time in 2 of 4 games, he's at least 19 fantasy points. The flip side of that coin is that he's at less than 2 in the other 2. So it's boom or bust, which is pretty much what I want. I don't want to be banal and just have like 11 fantasy points. Let's have either an amazing game or a poor game. And with Chris Godwin out this week, I can kind of trust Scotty Miller.
All right, it is time to get into Frankenstein's monster team. We're back here. Patrick Claybon, Adam Rank. This is the daily fantasy doctor himself, Frank. Get it? Frankenstein, Adam Rank. Tell us which spare parts it's good. It's really good. Which spare parts did you stitch together and create a monster out of this week for daily?
Well, I was just trying to look at some of the best values possible looking at my team. And as we look at it right here, took some somewhat easy ones, spending up on Tyler Boyd, who we talked about earlier in the show. George Kittle, I wanted to make sure that he was in my lineup this week, even though the Seattle Seahawks have given up a lot of fantasy production or have not given up a lot of fantasy production to tight ends. I still think that passing defense in general is not very bad. But that's part of a stack that I'm doing with Jimmy Garoppolo. And as you look right there, the Seahawks have allowed a top 12 fantasy quarterback in 5 of 6 games this season. So I really do believe that this is going to end up being a higher scoring game. And if I could get him in, and I got Brandon Ayuk also in this one, really want to load up with the 49ers, trying to find a low value quarterback to go with. And I went with Darnell Mooney for the Chicago Bears. A lot of people might not recognize this player's name, probably haven't seen a lot of him this season. But with Allen Robinson doubtful this week against the New Orleans Saints, there's an opportunity. They've trusted him in some big spots this season. And, you know, as a rookie, he makes some great plays, doesn't make some great plays. Now, that play they showed right there, he put Jalen Ramsey on skates and was gone. And if it wasn't for the pressure, it wasn't necessarily a bad throw by Nick Foles. It was the pressure by the Rams defense which caused that play. Otherwise, that would have been a touchdown.
All right, so that is the Frankenstein monster team. Thanks, Rank. We're going to shoot some electricity through that lineup, send it out into the town, and see how people react to it. In the meantime, we're getting the rest of our mad scientists back in here on Halloween. Of course, I am floating through space in some kind of galactic library, dealing with time dilation, all of that. Then we have MJD, who is trying to get vengeance for his family, Sir Purr himself. And then Marcus Grant has nailed this Cam Newton. In fact, look at this, everybody. He did it. He is Cameron Jarrell Newton today as Marcus Grant, nailing that costume. Let's get into some more Sunday showdowns. The Chargers and the Broncos. MJD, give us a must start here.
Well, it has to be Justin Herbert. I mean, regardless of who they're playing, they're throwing the ball down the field. He has Keenan Allen playing well, targeting his tight ends in the red zone. And Herbert's just been flat out balling. So for me, if you're lucky enough to pick him up off the waiver wire, he's a must start each week. And this is one where I think he may have a big game.
Well, if you are looking for some quarterback help, if you got buys, you got injuries, what have you, Drew Lock could be a sleeper for you this week. I know the numbers haven't been great for him so far, but he's also had a really tough start to his schedule. And this, at least on paper, is the best matchup he's had all year. The Chargers giving up the third most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Their secondary has just 3 interceptions. That's tied for 4th fewest in the league. So this might be an opportunity for Drew Lock and his pass catchers to actually get some space to operate.
And last but not least, it's Colts Lions. And if you're getting spooked this Halloween season and worried about the Colts defense, don't be with Kenny Golladay. I was, and then I looked it up. You should not be afraid. This Colts defense up against true ones. Allen Robinson went off. T. Higgins, A.J. Green both went off. They had a couple of good weeks against the Browns, perhaps. But no, this Kenny G's reign of dominance continues here. He's a must-start.
I like it, Patrick. And on the other side of the ball, I'm saying start Jonathan Taylor. He has seen 35% of the Colts touches this year. His snaps have increased in every game since week 3. And it is a great matchup as the Lions are in the top 6 in fantasy points and rushing yards allowed to running backs this season.
If you want more knowledge like that, go to NFL.com. Check out all of Michael F. Florio's work. Thank you for joining us today, Sir Per. Use the rest of the afternoon to find Robbie Anderson.
You really call him that,
Get him to truly know who you are. We are back here on NFL Fantasy Live with some fantasy horror stories. We've dimmed the lights and gathered around the campfire. Marcus, who's got you spooked this Halloween?
Years ago, there was a man who killed opposing defenses. He carved them up with his right arm and trampled them between the 20s. But he was most lethal at the goal line, where he steamrolled anyone who stood in his way. After being chased from his Carolina home, he resettled in Massachusetts, where he beached a pod of Dolphins and plucked a flock of Seahawks. But after being rounded up by a stable of Broncos and locked up by a gang of 49ers, this former killer appears to have been defanged. Now comes his scariest confrontation of all. He'll have to face a pack of hungry buffaloes without the help of his closest accomplices. It all adds up to the silence of the cab.
In a world where Deshaun Watson is on a bye, it's Deshaun of the Living Dead. This week, we're going to have to stream a quarterback who's on the run and being chased by opposing defenses. Just when you think he is going to get your team to fantasy glory, so close, so far, when no one can hear you scream and you fall on your face, Deshaun of the Dead, weak.
Ben DiNucci. That's it. You can just go to Ben DiNucci is the quarterback. I drafted Amari Cooper. We drafted CD Lamb. We drafted Michael Gallup. They're done. But all we have is Ezekiel Elliott. And you know what? To be honest with you guys, we could just scrap this. I think I can be a better quarterback than Ben DiNucci this week. Check out this throw. I mean, look at this bomb down the field. Oh, well, hey, that was the wrong one. That was the wrong one. Are you kidding me? Oh, my, it was all set up.
You had to put DiNucci on blast. That's our time for today. We hope everybody has a safe and happy Halloween. We'll see you back here on Monday at 6 Eastern for a preview of Monday Night Football. Pick up whoever you want. Remember, in space, no one can hear you stream.